And welcome to tonight's edition of the One Hood Power Hour. As you know, on the last Monday of the month, starting in March, we began the legislative visit series. And tonight we have another special legislative visit with State Representative Jake Wheatley discussing laws surrounding adult cannabis use in the state of Pennsylvania and efforts to reform the current laws that are on the books to permit adult use of cannabis in the state of Pennsylvania. And also, I'm always here with my co-host, Miracle Jones. We believe that Ryan White will be joining us sometime in the hour. So before we get to State Representative Jake Wheatley and the current efforts around the state to legalize adult cannabis use, what is one of your hot takes about what's happening in the political world right now?
I don't know where to start. It's already been a week and it's only Monday. It started off with breaking news that, what we already talked about prior on the show is that Pennsylvania is losing a congressional seat. For the census results came out and the redistricting of the U.S. Congress is going to be going into effect pretty soon. And Pennsylvania is one of 7 states, / commonwealths that are actually losing a seat because our population did not grow in relation to some of our other states. Didn't grow as much, I should say. We are still in Pennsylvania expanding the population, but in proportion to places like Florida, North Carolina, and Texas, that proportion did not grow as much. So we're losing a district, which we already knew. And so there's some conversations around that, what that looks like, and what it's going to mean for the 2022 election. And in addition, we've had Merrick Garland announced a investigation into the Louisville Police Department, into their patterns and practices because of some of the evidence that came to light during the uprisings for Breonna Taylor. There have been allegations of sexual misconduct against the Louisville Police Department, allegations that they've been lying and falsifying police reports, using excessive force in traffic stops, and of course violating people's civil rights. And along the same lines in North Carolina, we are still waiting on some video footage, dash cam footage, body camera footage into the shooting death of Mr. Brown. The family held a press conference earlier saying that this was the execution. And so there is, for the next week or so, supposed to be a lot of unrest. And on top of that, we're also seeing globally a fight for vaccinations because the vaccination formulas and waivers have not been released. So there are people in the global south, particularly in places like India, who are really being hard hit with COVID-19 right now because they don't have access to the vaccines. And so that's some of the things that are going on the world stage. And that's why we're trying to have these conversations and these legislative visits, because we understand, all politics is local, and what happens on the national also affects the local as well.
Absolutely. And one thing I wanted to share is I had the opportunity to interview David Thornburg from the Committee of 70 this afternoon at Freedom Corner about the great Pennsylvania Volkswagen tour. They're taking a Volkswagen van across the state of Pennsylvania. They have made over 40 stops, and they were recently in the city of Pittsburgh. I believe they're headed to Westmoreland and Johnstown in the next couple of days, but they're just going to raise awareness about redistricting, about gerrymandering, about the way that the political process can really kind of toxify, how lines are drawn and kind of just our entire political landscape by really making primary elections, the whole deal, which then kind of really polarizes, our politics in to the extreme kind of levels that it's at right now. So I thought it was a really great conversation. You can check it out on One Hood Media's Facebook page. Again, it was a conversation with David Thornburg, the CEO of the Committee of 70, who's also a former Pittsburgher and also the son of former Governor Dick Thornburg. So that was like a really cool conversation that we had, and definitely check it out if you have the opportunity. And there's one other thing that I like to add, is that we are going to share in the comments One Hood Media's voter guide for those out there who want to know who are the candidates. Anybody who's registered to vote in the state of Pennsylvania can jump on. You can check your voter registration status. You can check out the ballot as it will appear in your local precinct. You can learn, more about the candidates, and over the next week or so, we will be rolling out a ton of more information about the upcoming election for those who are still gathering their information about who to vote for in the upcoming municipal primary.
And I think Ryan is going to join us now. But as we bring him in, I think it's also important to remind that the support, the American Recovery Act financial support is.
I think we may have lost a Miracle for a second. So while we wait for Miracle to come back, Ryan, do you want to just give your quick hot take before we bring Miracle back in, and then we'll bring our guest on?
Yeah, absolutely. You might have mentioned this already. Sorry, everyone, running a little late. But we're 1 week away from the registration deadline for when you have to register by for the upcoming primary election. So definitely get on that. This week, and utilize our voter tools and resources in doing that as well. Also, it's apportionment day, which we did the episode related to redistricting and gerrymandering recently. And so that's, a really important early step in the process of determining if we are in fact going to lose a congressional seat, which, obviously has huge implications as far as the redrawing of districts and combating gerrymandering. So, it'll be really, really interesting to see how that all plays out, what that data reflects. And then, one other thing I did want to mention was the situation in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, that's ongoing right now. As far as, and I haven't looked at it in a couple hours, but the last thing I saw was that they were delaying the release of the body cam footage, to the family, because they were going to be redacting faces of people who were in the video, blurring them out. And I think that's really just speaks to the truth that we see over and over again, that these incremental reforms of compromise, like mandated body cameras, like banning chokeholds, like requiring implicit bias training, police departments with those just incremental reforms are going to continue to find ways to walk back and dilute any of those reforms through doing things like delaying the release and redacting faces in the video, blurring them out. So I think that really speaks to the urgency and importance for much more, foundational systemic change that we really need to see in terms of how our country addresses public safety and all those institutions that that we base around that. So I think this is really another clear instance of this, and until we can address that, from a more institutional systemic standpoint, we're going to continue to see a landscape where Derek Chauvin actually getting fully held accountable in a court of law for his actions as an officer continues to be the exception, not the rule. And I think we can all agree that that's not the way that we would like that situation to be.
Right. Yeah. No. Thank you for that. And with that, we're gonna bring in our guest state representative, Jake Wheatley, along with Miracle returning as well. Welcome. Go ahead, Miracle.
I thought Jake was trying to unmute. So yeah, so like what we're talking about, there's a lot of issues, going on nationally, and that are of grave concern to a lot of folks. And we know we've had Representative Wheatley on prior. This is before he assumed his new role, new house of prestige within the Pennsylvania legislative body. And so there's been a lot of work that's been done in the past few months to respond to everything from the COVID-19 crisis to adult use cannabis. And so he wanted to have this legislative visit to talk about some legislation that's being proposed, some of the barriers that are coming on, some of the local elections that we need to look forward to, and how Representative Wheatley is engaging politics to have a lot of needed reforms, bring a lot of needed reforms to Pennsylvania. So with that, we want to just welcome Representative Wheatley, who is also, for transparency, my representative in Pennsylvania. So I just wanted to welcome you to the program.
Thank you for having me, Miracle. Thank you, Kahari, Ryan. It's good to see you all again. And before I jump into my thing, I think that all of you touched on your hot takes. You touched on this, the issue of the violence that is happening to folk across the country as it relates to law enforcement. But I also want to make sure I send an acknowledgement to everyone who's suffering through some form of loss today, because there are a lot of, it seems like the siege is happening again on our streets. Coming out of the pandemic and COVID, we're starting to see an increase in, at least in my opinion, we're starting to see an increase in violence on our streets. And I just want to, let everyone out there know, mothers, fathers, children, that we see you, we feel you, and we're working on those too. And one of the main impetus for why I even got into this cannabis space was because this plant is the cause of a lot of misery for families. It's a cause for why some of our people get pulled over in traffic, and not even involving in cars, but on the street get pulled over just from the law enforcement end of it. But it's also a cause of pain of seeing lost loved ones going to prison for small amounts of holding a plant that should never have been made illegal, and then their lives ruined, and their chances for their family lives and quality of life gets diminished. So, I think it's all tied into this network of how do we reform our society? How do we make it so that adults can make conscious decisions of what's right for them and their bodies, without harming other people, and without the fear of it ending in either a death sentence or in a long-term prison sentence.
Thank you for that. I just had a quick question. I know Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman has been very vocal. You've been very vocal. I know you've been working with Governor Wolf and the administration, as well. Could you just kind of give us an update on where the state of it is at? I know there was a thinking before the pandemic that it was something that may have potentially passed, later in 2020. But now, obviously, we're in a new session. Where does kind of the state of this legislation lie right now?
Yeah, I think we're in a blessing and a curse moment right now. The blessing is, I think, cannabis, the discussion around cannabis, adult use cannabis, is moving all around us. You see states like Delaware, New Jersey, New York. You're starting to hear about Ohio and others. You just saw Mexico pass adult use Virginia. So you're seeing it happening around us and across the country. The cursed part of it is, I want to thank our federal members in Congress for sending us American Rescue Plan, but it let us off the hook of the financial pressures when Pennsylvania was faced with $4 billion budget deficit for this coming budget. You know, everything was on the table. All the revenue opportunities were on the table. But now that we're going to receive $7.3 billion, you know, the pressures to do something immediate is less. So when I talk to the Republican leadership and my Republican colleagues who were at least interested in talking about what the numbers could look like before we knew what the federal rescue plan was going to give us, now they're saying, hey, we want to take a pause on that. And so we're hoping to keep the pressure to try to get something, but it's more realistic that it's probably going to be another 2 years before we see this thing happen in Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, I'm going to keep pressuring it for us to have it as a part of our budget discussion this year. You saw the Republican senator from Erie, Senator Laughlin, with Sharice Street. They have a bipartisan bill, the first ever, which I want to congratulate them in their effort. And Senator Laughlin, when you listen to him, he talks about his district being the most impoverished in America. Like it blew my mind when he said that. And he was talking about the opportunity for this industry to bring jobs, to bring opportunities, to allow those who have been hit with criminal records to come back into because right now they can't even work in the industry, even though it's legal on the medical side. And so I think that is a wonderful step forward in this session, that you have a Republican who's willing to say we need to do this now. But when you talk to the House leadership and the House Republicans right now, there is no appetite to even discuss it, because the revenue number for them is no longer critical as it was before.
Ron, do you have a question?
Yeah, just following up on that, you know, financial component of that you're talking about, the economic impact of this. You know, do you have any specific you know, approximate metrics related to your proposed legislation, as far as, you know, like how much tax revenue, you know, how many jobs that would potentially create? Just, you know, if you have any approximate numbers on that for this bill.
Yeah, we've been using primarily, we use some of the numbers from the former Auditor General. He did a study several years ago now, it's a little dated, but he did a study, and based off of his projections, we took his number and we estimated that, depending upon what level we wanted to put in the tax code, we could get anywhere from $300 million to $1 billion when it's fully ramped up, when the industry is fully ramped up. Now, when we look across the country, we just saw numbers that talked about this is one of the fastest growing industries across the country. I think the last year there were 77,000 people working in the cannabis space. That we know the tax revenues is in the billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that's potentially coming in from this space, both on the medical and adult use side across the country. We think we all see that this is an emerging industry that can be profitable. We also think the delay that Pennsylvania has, when all of its surrounding states are starting to jump in early, it puts farmers at risk. It puts our market, our potential to grow our market and be the leader in this space. It puts all of that at risk, because if we do wait for the federal government to deschedule this drug or to make it legal across the country, then those who already have you know, their operations up and running, they're going to ship into Pennsylvania. We're not going to be able to have ours operationalized in enough time to help our farmers and help our business owners in the state. So we really think that we're doing a disservice to the taxpayers of the Commonwealth to not necessarily create a Pennsylvania specific industry and to get ourselves ready and positioned to take advantage of this industry.
And what kind of feedback do you get from legislators who are in opposition to it? You know, when you see just from a competitive standpoint, so many of our neighboring states, jumping in, obviously New York, which is a huge deal, is jumping in. I know it's going to take them about a year and a half to get online, but obviously that's going to be a game changer, particularly for folks who live in the southeastern part of the state, rather. They're going to be so close to those markets, in New Jersey, in New York. Is there any concern about, the competitive disadvantage of how Pennsylvania is positioning itself by, delaying moving forward on this kind of stuff?
So, I've had several conversations with not only the Republican leader, but I had it with some of the members in the caucus. And what's interesting is universally, they will accept that this industry is eventually going to get to us, right? If you talk to them, they will tell you 2 to 5 years. They know Pennsylvania will probably have, an adult use. We'd have to move towards an adult use because we just across the country we're seeing it happen. One of the most interesting comments that I had when I had a conversation with one of my colleagues was he talked about a study out of Colorado, and he said what it showed is right now in areas, there are certain areas that have high utilization already, and there are some who have low utilization. And in markets that have gone to a full legalization, they have seen those who have low utilization tend to have more utilization, which makes sense, right? Because when it becomes available, more people will probably, try it at least. Maybe they don't stick with it, but they'll try it. He said there was no motivation for him to help, bring this industry on if it's going to mean that his community, which he thinks is low utilization, will start to use it more. And I had to laugh. I had to say, the reason why you probably see numbers if you believe you have low utilization is that most people aren't going to answer a survey and say, yeah, I'm smoking an illegal thing even once a month. They're not going to answer that, right? So you think you have low utilization, but we know universally, no matter if you're in a white community or a black community, the utilization is the same. So there's no higher utilization just because you're in a poor black and brown community. We just get exposed. The numbers get skewed our way, but the utilization is the same. So I think it's the misconception, the miseducation of my colleagues. And this is why we started this process. We had one this past week where we started a roundtable discussion, just trying to educate people on the information. We try to bring experts in to talk to us to make sure people understand, because some people fear that you're going to have more youth getting exposed to it. Well, right now you have an unregulated market where youth are getting exposed to the drug right now, this plant, but we don't know what's in it. Like, it's in its natural state. It's not harmful, but when you start putting all this other stuff in it, it becomes very dangerous. In an unregulated, illegal market, your youth and everyone else has that access to it, and they don't have any education. They don't know what's in it. If we regulated it, they can come into a legal space, not teens, but anyone over 21 can come into a legal space and know exactly what they're getting. So these arguments don't really make sense to me, and from my perspective. But I know there are certain people who are moralistically against the legalization issue. There are some people who fear that this will lead to, a further degrading of our, social standard in their beliefs. And when you have arguments like that, it's hard to, debate it from a rational standpoint, because that's just someone's, belief system.
Yeah, and I know like New York and New Jersey get a lot of attention, but also Michigan is one of the states that did full adult legalization of use, but they also kind of created a system that's reparational in a sense that set aside licenses for people who've been impacted and set aside a portion of the profits to go back and invest into the community. And I was wondering, can you talk about some of the social implications of adult use cannabis? You started off talking about the harm and trauma that this plant has caused from mass incarceration and over policing. So can you talk about some of the ways that we could look at other states to repair some of this harm?
Yeah, and I know for us, and I think on the Senate side too, I can't speak totally for them, but I think the benefit that we've had is right now you've had, I think it's up to 14 or 15 states that's gone before us that at some level have gone into the adult use legalization space. And so we are learning from each of those states kind of what we should be thinking about and how we can improve upon what they've done. And I know in our package that we're hopefully going to put forth, you'll see some of that Michigan flavor, but not just them, others where we've tried to use, because the governor has even said, we want to make sure when we bring this industry on that we right some of the social wrongs that had happened for communities that were highly negatively impacted. So if from a standpoint of supporting business investments, to helping them access in a more simplistic way to get into the industry, we know that a big component of ours is we want folk who have been penalized historically for cannabis to have ability to be owners in the space, to be workers in the space, to and even have supports outside of this space. And so that's a part of ours. I know the Senator Sharif and Laughlin, that's a part of their intention. And so everyone, I think one of the number one things right alongside revenue for some people is the social and criminal justice reforms, immediate expungement of records, giving them access into the industry, making sure that people can't be disqualified from employment for basically something that we're going to make legal. So all these aspects is things that we're going to be dealing with in these bills that you'll see coming forth in this new session.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just following up on Miracle's last question and your last point about that, can you talk a little bit about, I believe it is House Bill 1070, that's focused on, giving minority small businesses, like creating more opportunities for them to operate in general, across industries, but how that type of legislation might make it easier as well to kind of try to, create that equity in the adult use cannabis industry that, at this point in the U.S., these last few years has been, dominated by typically wealthy white investors. So you just talk a little bit about how that other proposed bill might fit into, making that more of an equitable space in general, and prioritizing, those communities that have been impacted by this a lot.
Yeah, since 2009, I just want you to know, since 2009, we've been proposing this bill. There's been different numbers over the session around, we really wanted to institutionalize some of the best practices that parts of our state departments are doing and others aren't. So depending upon what commission or authority or department you're dealing with, they may have some type of rules relating to utilizing minority-owned firms or women-owned firms or veteran-owned firms, but it wasn't universal. There's no universal law. Now the governor, depending on the administration, they might have some type of executive order, but there's nothing that institutionalized this from administration to administration and so on and so forth. And so that's why we think you have this considerably low number of small business owners of color and of who are women who are accessing state contracts, because our environment basically says, yeah, we say one thing, but the practice of it is another thing. And so what you have with House Bill 1070, and actually it's premature. My staff released it. We're still working on we're working with the administration on some stuff. You'll see a joint release of this. We're calling it the diversity business package of bills. We'll have a joint release with Senator Hughes, who's going to do something similar in the Senate, and our bill in the administration. But we want to really take some of the things we see. Maryland is like the gold standard as it relates to opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses. So we're going to take some of the stuff we see them doing, some of the stuff that we're doing right here from our gaming commission. When we bring on this new industry and adult use, we want to learn. We want to create its own little process, because we didn't do as well. We have language in the medical cannabis side, but the oversight of it, the accountability to it, nobody's really making sure what we have in our language actually meets what we're doing in practice. So we really want to get this right, and I think that's what 1070 and bills like that are trying to do. We want to offer up opportunities, real opportunities for minority. And I got to stop saying small business owners, because you can be a minority or a woman business owner and not be small, but still need support in helping you break the barriers that are preventing you from really, maximizing your abilities inside of this space. And by the way, we're having a conversation with the Small Business Administration on April the 29th, coming up this week from 6 to 7. I'll make sure we give you all the information so that you can get it to your network. Because again, Miracle talked about the American Rescue Plan. And if I'm an entrepreneur, or if I'm a person looking to be an entrepreneur, to be honest, this is the time you want to start creating your space and figuring out what you want to do, because there are going to be billions of dollars. This governor and this president, President Biden, Moneybag Uncle Biden, whatever you want to call him, he's definitely stayed true to his word. I don't think people expected him to be this progressive. And I don't think people expected the Senate Democrats and the House Democrats to be this aggressive in trying to really help this country come back, not only with the American Rescue Plan, which is major and what's in it. You all should actually have Congressman Doyle or Lamb or somebody break down what's all in this, because I think when people really understand it, it's a major boost to not only state and local governments, but to families. But then on top of that, they're coming right back around with an infrastructure bill that could be $2 trillion. He's talking about a direct family support bill around child tax. Around children and youth and education. Think about these. These are $1 trillion packages, never before done, that's going to be infused in our economy and to our families. And I think that's an important thing for us to distinguish. When people say, why should I vote? I think this is showing you why you should vote, because who's in those offices matter.
Now, thank you for that. I did want you to briefly, discuss. Recently, you were at an event to highlight, I believe it was $122 million that the Pittsburgh Public Schools is receiving, in COVID relief. So could you talk a little bit, about that, as far as particularly for the parents of Pittsburgh Public School students, and what to look forward, and if there's other, monies to, other school districts in the greater Pittsburgh area as well, that the parents should be expecting to come into the school district.
So let me say this. Schools have been underfunded. Our school's educational system is whack, basically. And it needs restructured. It needs redone. Not just from the money, but from how we deliver it, right? There's a case right now, a lawsuit right now, that hopefully, I hope they win, which will force Pennsylvania to have to deal with its inequitable financing system for education, because normally that means poor Black and brown kids are the ones who get left behind consistently. But with that being said, Allegheny County School District will see a total of $300 million infusion of cash. Now, it's not coming as one big check. They're going to get checks every month from now until 2024. But that money can be used primarily for, they have very much a lot of flexibility to how they can use that money. 20%, though, has to go towards directly towards supporting the lost learning of children and students. So here, if I'm a parent in the city of Pittsburgh, you're going to get a little less than $122 million over the next 2 or 3 years. And the first thing I want to know from the school board and the superintendent and those who are in the system is how you're going to help my child, who many of them was struggling before pandemic. How are you going to help them not only catch up to where they were before, but to excel to where we need them to be, right? So that you need a plan. You actually need a plan, and parents and community folks should be a part of helping that plan. So right now, I think the district has kind of an idea, but I think we need to know more about what that idea is, because when you get this money, I don't want that just to go into your normal coffers, right? I need you to be identifying what are the gaps. And like for me, I state I have 3 children. All 3 of them are different learners. And what you do for one won't necessarily benefit the other 2. And so you have to have a strategy to make sure you separating what Jake needs from what Miracle needs in a system that is flexible enough to give us both what we need without disadvantaging either one of us. And that takes a lot of time, and that takes a commitment. And you can't just put that into staff. You know, I think you're going to hear them say, and we heard it today, they're going to put it into professional development. Some of it. Well, you do need to train our teachers, train our administrators. You do need to do new technology. You know, they want to continue to get technological advancement. You want to do all those hardcore things, but you also have to do stuff that gets down to the nitty-gritty of learning and helping kids who have been stuck for a year of school online for the most part. And just looking at, I'm a parent. When I saw my children online, I'm gonna tell you, they are doing all right grade-wise, but that online stuff didn't work for them, right? Their learning, in my opinion, took a step back. So in order to get them back up, I think you need to have intensive supports for kids, and also mental supports for kids, because they're coming out of a situation where they were locked away, told it was bad to be around people and all of those stuff. Now you put them back in schools and you want them to be able to pay attention for 7 to 8 hours of a day and do all that. You got to have some mental support. So I think this is the time where we have to have all those wraparound services prepared for our kids, not just while they're in the school setting, but that's why I'm a big proponent of out of school and after school. You got to make sure the out of school and after school program spaces, they're safe, nurturing, and we ain't just pounding the academic thing either. We're going to put it back in. Kids got to learn to be kids again, like learn to play, be okay with playing and all, but you got to have safe spaces. And I'm hoping that this money gets shifted in such a way that you do the whole child supports, and not just, we're going to do the professional development stuff. We're going to put more computers in front of them, and hopefully that catches them up from the loss to learn.
Right. Miracle?
Yeah, I think it's very important to talk about the wraparound services, and there's been a lot of discussions about getting more social workers involved, creating more pipelines, from high school to college, middle school, to college. And so what do you also see as kind of like your role in this new educational system that we're trying to create that's going to not only deal with the family, but also the community?
Yeah, I think one of my main roles is to make sure we have all those systemic barriers, either resource barriers or barriers to, how do you actually make this connection between what's happening inside of buildings to what's happening with families and their communities, making sure those barriers are minimized and if all possible, eliminated. So that's part of the space. When we look at the state's role, we're like we set those standards. We used to give 50% of the support, and I think we have to get back to not only setting the standards, but giving that additional support from our state Department of Education, being more actively involved with helping district kind of resolve some of these questions of how do we use these things? Do you have best practices to help us do it in a better, more creative way? To trying to help connect the dots with how these school systems work inside of communities, again, with our after school, out of school time programs, with our child care service providers, with our, all those things. I think my role in that is to make sure these systems are working and aligning as seamlessly as possible.
And I just had one other question. I posted it in the chat, and you had signed on as a co-sponsor to House Bill 1205 that would give compensation to the wrongly imprisoned. Can you talk a little bit about that bill and and your involvement in it?
Yeah, I mean, this is another one that's going back to years. I mean, we've seen a lot of our citizens through this, I'm just gonna say, through this failed criminal justice system, who have been in prison wrongly, And then they had this new thing with the DNA starting to show people and get them out, and they spent 20 years in prison, and then they would leave with a, oh, I'm sorry, but no compensation behind, the state really putting you in jail for 20 years and all of the lost opportunities of employment and time with your family. You can't really put a cost to it, but they should be able to receive some compensation that gets them situated in a better position. And like I said, this bill has been around, well, different versions of this type of bill has been around, and I just support this idea. I mean, I really think when government makes an error, not even, sometimes it's malicious, sometimes it's intentional, but when government does it, we have a tremendous responsibility to make it right. And again, money is not the only way to make it right, but money certainly makes it easier for people who serve long times wrongly in a system and then come out here, and they still have to fight to make themselves whole again. And I think that this bill essentially tries to create a space to do that for people who have been wrongly in prison.
Thank you for that. Ron, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thanks, Kahari. Yeah, and I wanted to ask about another piece of legislation you're sponsoring, actually, which is of particular concern in Allegheny County. Following some of the studies on maternal mortality, especially for Black women in Allegheny County and Pittsburgh, that have come to light over the past couple of years, in like the bottom 3rd percentile in the country, I think, and lagging behind a lot of other nations as well, nationwide. So if you could just talk a little bit about, what that bill that's meant to address those issues with maternal mortality is, how it is seeking to address that issue, and what are some of the main provisions of that?
So, and I have to say this, and Representative Morgan Cephas, she's really been the statewide leader on this issue, and it wasn't until recently she made a point. She had some bills last session dealing with doulas, midwives, talking about this issue. And I guess this was one of my blind spots. You run around doing so much stuff, you forget about the basic thing called life. Like when you're dealing with a mother and a child through the life birthing process, and you find out that I represent a district that has some of the highest numbers, rates of infant mortality, as well as mother mortality. I thought that was, when she kind of laid it out for me, and then I talked to the Department of Health, the county Department of Health, and they was like, "Yo, that's been going on for years." And I'm like, "What the hell I've been?" You know what I'm saying? And so I jumped on this whole thing and finding out that we really need to do more around our doulas and midwives, because a lot of these systems just don't. Unfortunately, they just don't respect Black moms. Especially when it comes to what they're saying their needs are. They think they're lying for paying medication or whatever, and they're not really respecting the mom the way that they should. And it's showing that we still have this duality of a system in healthcare where, no matter how wealthy you are, if you're white in this healthcare, you get treated a little different than if you're Black or brown in this healthcare system. And I just think people like Morgan, Representative Cephas, and all of these individuals who are really stepping in this space and saying it's a systemic change that we need. Right? We need to change this system, because it's not just about educating. You have to educate them, but you also have to start to change the way they view the patient who's coming in the door, and they have to put the patient center, their interests and their needs and their understanding their world first. And that's what many of this packet that Morgan is pushing is trying to do.
Yeah, and I really I'm thankful that you signed on that. And for a lot of people, there's also we talked about the local, the national. There's also the Mominous bill, and locally, Morgan Overton put a slide together about what the Mominous bill would do on the federal level. And so you're talking about a lot of these health disparities, and with that also comes COVID-19. That's kind of allowed a lot of people to fully understand how these health disparities are impacting particularly Black and brown folks, immigrant folks, and queer and trans folks. And I know last week there was a conversation about the rollout that the Democrats are putting to get people support with COVID-19 and with the budget. So what are some of the conversations that you're seeing behind the scenes around like health overall, and what is some of the ways that Pennsylvania legislators are trying to like tackle these disparities?
Yeah, so we have a bill. We're pushing this bill, trying to do what they did on the city level, declaring racism as a public health crisis. We really want to use this as a way to really look at all of our budgeting processes to try to do it from an equity lens, when instead of just budgeting, based off the whims of the administration. And I support this administration, but to really take a look at everything we're spending and saying, how will this either help or hurt the disparities that we see throughout our system? Because health is more than just what's happening to your body. You know what I'm saying? Health is what's happening around you in your environment. Health is what's happening to you as it relates to your economics. There's a holistic way to approach this healthy community, healthy people, and healthy state type of concept. And we would like to really take that and put that front and center, because we think if you don't state it as something that is a priority, you will never be able to address it long term. And the other thing I wanted to say is, again, there is a lot of resources that will be coming down the pike over the next couple of years. And if we don't take the moment in time to say, how are those resources, don't just send them back through the same processes that were disparate before we began, because what's going to happen, no matter, even if people say we want to do something different, the systems themselves don't allow you to really do too much different, because the rules of engagement are the same. The same people who are overseeing them were the same ones before COVID hit. So that's why I think it's important that we stay aggressively talking to the people who are in place now, saying, no, what are the new ways? What are the ways you're going to receive this money and then redistribute it in a way that changes the outcome on the end versus what you were doing before? Because if your process is the same as before, when you receive these billions of dollars, your outcome is going to be the same, right? It's like you're getting them, you're putting them right back in these systems. You're just getting more money to do more damage down the road. So there has to be a time right now where people are talking about systemically, there are gaps here, there are gaps here. Here, we're gonna take this chunk of money, we're gonna put it in this form, and we're gonna allocate it differently than we were before, because there are real barriers to us doing it that way. But I don't know if people really are trying to do that. I think people are grabbing this money, and it's so fast, they're trying to grab it and spend it before the populace can wake up and say, hey, wait, slow down, hold on. I know we need this critical help, but before you start putting it in here, let's talk about how you're going to process and distribute this help. Because I want to be you don't need to send it to Fox Chapel to come back to help me in Homewood. You know what I'm saying? Send it to Homewood. Let us in Homewood figure out what we need to do with it, and then we'll tell you who the partners we want to bring to the table.
Right.
Ron, go ahead,
Miracle.
I was like, so talking about partnerships, it is an election season, right? There's a lot of, there's a lot of outreach, and you've been very involved in the current race for mayor here in Pittsburgh. Can you just talk about what led you to endorse Ed Gainey, and what are some of the things that you would hope that, regardless of who wins, the next administration will bring to the city?
First of all, I tell people, endorsements don't mean nothing for real. The only endorsement that matters are the endorsement of the electorate, and I want to encourage every man, woman, who's able or other who's able to vote, get out and vote and participate in this election, because it's important. These local elections are more important than the national. And I know the energy for last cycle when we were running, we had the national thing going. We had parties every weekend. They had early voting in every little location to try to increase. And if you really believe in that concept of trying to make it easier for access, we should do it no matter who's running, right? No matter who it is. Okay, so saying that, Ed is outside of being my personal friend and my brother, I really think the man has a heart of gold. I think whenever there's been a call to action, that man been in front of it. He's not been afraid to take on serious issues and tackle things that aren't politically easy or correct. I think he's shown the interest of love of this city. And one of the main important things, like this man is from Pittsburgh, born and raised on these same streets. He spent time coming up, learning under various administration. And before we get to the political and the policy stuff, I like to check people's heart, because the heart will tell you what you're going to do in the time of difficulty. And that man's heart is always going to select the people over all this other BS when it gets down to it. Like, you know, so for me, that's way more important than any other thing that a person brings to the table. Now, I'm not, you know, I think no matter who wins, we're in a crossroad moments for the city of Pittsburgh, because the time when I came here in 1997, one of the main things people were saying is, oh, we got a diversity issue. We need to diversify our boards. We need to help Black people. And they had all this whole thing going on in 1997 to try to get Black folk more into the C-suites downtown and to help improve their communities and so on. And then we fast forward, it's 2021, and we still talking about the same garbage, and it actually is going back. You know what I'm saying? We still losing. This is the worst place for African American women, and by extension, African American families. Because if our women are suffering, our whole family suffering, right? And so nobody is talking about this. Whoever gets into that mayor's office seat, they have to be talking about how they're going to increase and change that dynamic. Like, not waiting another 10 years, but how are we going to do that right now? And again, it goes back to these systems, because if your systems are the same and the same people who are controlling these systems are in the same position 30 years later, guess what you're going to get on the outside? You're going to, no matter what you change on the outside, if you're going to change these systems and how they're processing these real realities, you're not going to change it. So, you know, you have to really dig in. You have to be willing to upset the apple cart. And that's why I laugh sometimes. You know, I might not always agree, but I think these people who are you know, like yourselves, a lot of you on this call right here, I think when you are uncompromising and demanding that we're not going to accept just what you're willing to give, but we're going to make you stretch and we're going to make you give the things that you weren't comfortable in giving with, that's the stuff that pressures people like us to continue to have to perform. And, you know, I'm not saying that the mayor or Ed wouldn't do it naturally, but we can't do it without you all keeping that pressure on everybody, making sure, like, I know you want to give that. You like, what I'm willing to give probably isn't what you need to transform. So you got to keep pressing me and say, no, I'm glad you're willing to give that, but now you got to go above and beyond that. You got to give more. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, sticking on the topic of you know, the upcoming primary elections, you know, one of the big concerns on a lot of people's radars, especially following the November elections, has been, you know, that wave of voter suppression bills that have been hitting, you know, pretty much every state in the country. You know, Pennsylvania obviously being no exception to that. So I just wanted to ask, you know, if there were any bills or voter suppression issues in particular that people should be, you know, keeping an eye on right now and really advocating against. And on the flip side, again, if there's any bills that are actually, you know, looking to expand voting rights and make it easier to vote and, you know, kind of counteract past voter suppression. If there's anything there you wanted to highlight as well, you know, and just any ways that people can get involved in supporting that.
So just recently, the state government committee, which is where all of the voting related bills will come through the state government committee. They just finished 14 days. I think it was 14 days of a hearing. It was very contentious. Matter of fact, you know, for all of the complaints of voter fraud and everything that people have been saying from the right, there's not one verifiable case of it happening here in Pennsylvania. But anyway, long story short, it's my understanding that the Republicans said that they're not moving anything before the primary, which is a good thing and a bad thing, because some of these counties they really pushed us to try to give them some relief as relates to our mail-in ballot application, the time frame for them to start the count, those type of things. I think would have made our election move smoother. I know that there is a movement to kind of limit the no excuse mail-in, which, by the way, was something that the Republicans asked for in a trade-off to try to get rid of just straight party voting. And now all of a sudden they have an issue with the no excuse mail-in. They want to curtail it a little bit. I think anything in a democracy that makes it easier for people to be able to vote and participate, especially in a country that still find it very hard to get the majority of our citizens to really participate each and every election, I think it's a good thing. As long as you can, and I think there's ways to verify. We have there are members who are talking about same day voting. There are members talking about expanding the mail-in process, making it an automatic thing for folk. So there are some ideas that Democrats have been putting on the table. But as of right now, I don't think there's anything coming down the pike before the primary. Well, I know there's nothing coming down the pike before the primary, but certainly Representative Seth Grow, who's the Republican chairman of the State Government Committee, and State Representative Margo Davison, who's the Democratic chair of the State Government Committee, might be good guests to have on at some point to talk to them directly about how they see it moving, because this is going to be contentious. It's mighty funny. We had all these people turn out, and for the first time seeing the country and the state of Georgia go Democratic, and then all of a sudden everyone has this problem with voting. They want to change the way voting is done. That should tell you a lot about where certain people are in this country.
Yeah, and I will, for our viewers, say we have reached out to a lot of the Pennsylvania GOP members, and they just haven't responded. So we have tried to invite people onto the show to talk about voting, how they see what the issues that they see about voting, how they do about voting engagement, but we haven't just heard back from them yet. But just also thinking about, I know you started the programs censoring the people we've been losing to gun violence. We notice, theoretically, summer months, spring, summer months, that's when gun violence, really becomes a huge issue. So can you talk about some of the ways that people can get involved, some of the things you're looking at on the legislative level, but what people are telling you that they need in order to curtail this violence that's happening?
Yeah, I had this mom reach out to me on social media. I have to say this because what she posted on my social media, it touched me in a way that, and as a father, but also from a legislative perspective. And she started posting all of the pictures of lost loved ones. And she basically said, nobody is fighting for the moms who are losing kids every day. And she was challenging me about doing more, right? And it made me do it. After 19 years, you think you're doing what you should be doing, and then you turn around and you look at it and you see just the same carnage happening. And I had to really take stock of what she was saying. And for me, I think I've always said this: violence is a learned behavior. Nobody comes out violent as a baby, you know what I'm saying? It's the culture and the environment starts to get fed into them of ways of how they deal with their environment through what they see, and then what's reinforced in their daily lives. And from a policy perspective, it's hard to address that part of it. But I think to do it, you have to do all. I'm a everything person. I'm throwing everything at it. And when I say that, I say when you look at these spaces, especially in high poverty spaces, and walk around and they don't have quality fields, or they don't have safe spaces to go to where you have nurturing environments with caring adults who themselves are making wages so that they don't have to put their families at risk just to save your family. These things all contribute to why you have this issue where people find it easy to take a life. You know what I'm saying? And then when you throw on top of it, you see the people who are supposed to be protecting life also taking the same life, and nobody's valuing your life. That stuff is, and then again, looking at these families and these moms, you know what I'm saying? I feel like I gotta do more. I don't know what the answer is yet. I don't know if it's just on it's not just about passing laws to restrict gun access. I think that's a part of it, but it's not all of that. I think it's not just about putting more money into our school systems, our after school systems, all that. I think you have to, I don't think it's just that, but I think you have to have a full-blown campaign of unlearning violence. I think you have to have a full-blown support system of mental health assessment and supports, because I think there's a lot of undealt with traumas that are impacting it. Like I tell people this is me personally, and I've shared this on, it took me a while to understand and accept my own traumas of my time in the military and my time before the military. I told them I was in the military before the military. I came out of the streets of Detroit, and there was traumas from that. And then I went to the military, and they actually taught me and trained me on how to use a gun. But then before they let me out, they didn't teach me how to be back into the society. So here it was. They was letting the trained, operatives who had these issues of anger and had this issue of not really understand the world, what their role was in the world. And I went out here and did crazy stuff. You know what I'm saying? And I think there's a responsibility, the ownership on government to correct that part of it. And, so we got to have structures to help people like that, and so when you're walking on edge every day, you're bound to explode if the wrong thing happens to you. And, you got to have a way to help people deal with these issues that are right before us. And I think, that's the big trauma. That's the big, the pandemic that we're not addressing, but that's the one that I think we need to work on the most.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. And for those who are just joining us, we are here with State Representative Jake Wheatley discussing a whole range of issues. But the conversation began with his efforts to reform the adult cannabis use laws in the state of Pennsylvania. So in the last few minutes that we have with you, Representative, is there any other issue that you want to discuss or something that we haven't touched on yet? Because I know we touched on a lot of different topics tonight.
Yeah, I think we hit the whole thing, man. I don't know. I could sit here for another 2 hours. I mean, y'all had did you have Joanna on here?
Yes, yeah. We had Joanna, a couple times.
Yeah, I got to make up for the time I had her on here. Y'all brought her into my space. You know what I'm saying? No, but I really appreciate that. You all have been consistent. You all have been at the forefront, and I'm just so proud. I mean, Kahari, you're not as young as you used to be. Miracle, Ryan, you are definitely young folk doing it, and I definitely think I'm so proud of you all. And every time I hear about the things that you are doing, I feel like our future is at hand today, and that we're in great hands. So, anything I can do to support you all's effort and work. And I want to encourage you all to continue to do that, because again, I know people believe politicians have they don't like people to criticize them or whatever. I think the thing that you all are doing are making the political environment change a lot. Like we have to come out and have to really get on our game and up our game. And it's like they said, steel sharpen, iron sharpen iron, and you all make us work and dig deeper. So keep going and keep pushing.
Thank you so much for that. Miracle, you always close us out, the right way. So I'm going to hand the baton to you.
Yes, so we want to thank Representative Jake Wheatley for joining us, who is, a representative here in Pennsylvania, who has been leading the forefront for a lot of these criminal justice issues, and has been making headway. And so we want to thank him so much for coming this evening and joining us for this past hour to talk about some legislation that he's introduced and co-sponsored and supported. In addition, with the 100 Media Network, we're committed to bringing you information through programming and news and outreach. And so for this week, we have a lot of programs. Tomorrow at 2:00, I will be joining Catapult Pittsburgh and Literacy Pittsburgh for a conversation about GED myths and facts. So tomorrow at 2:00, we'll be having a conversation with Tammy Thompson and Keisha from Catapult and Dan from Literacy Pittsburgh. Tomorrow evening at 6:30, we are very honored to support the ACLU for their program, What Are the Magistrate Judicial Judges? Because those are judges who you are going to come before for anything first. They're either first line of offense or defense when you're going through the justice system here in Allegheny County. On Wednesday, we have a lot of programming as well. This Week in White Supremacy is Wednesday at 6. But also, after that, at 6:30, Farouk, who is the Director of Operations, is going to be having a conversation with the Keystone Education Fund and some others about avoiding judicial bingo, how to engage the judiciary. And Ryan, I believe, is actually at 6:00 on Wednesday going to be working with the Abolitionist Law Center and APA, talking about why we have to fight back against solitary confinement. That's going to be Wednesday at 6. And then Thursday at noon, we have on Tilt the state of Black mental health in America. And with everything that's going on, Julius Footwright and Mama Brown are going to be talking about how do we take care of our mental health? How do we engage when we see so much pain and trauma going on? So that's the programming that we have for you this week. Like we talked about at the top of the hour, we posted in the chat. Please make sure you are registered to vote. Here in Pennsylvania, the registration deadline is May 3rd. If you're a first-time voter, if you've changed your name, if you've changed your address, you have to re-register here in Pennsylvania, and you have until May 3rd to do that. In addition, today, a lot of people got the first batch of ballots, so you can actually mail those back in today, or you can wait until the 12th and take them down to the Board of Elections and drop it off there. But if you have decided that you do not want to vote by mail, you must surrender your ballot at official polling location. If not, you will only be able to vote by provisional ballot, and that ballot only gets counted at the end of the election cycle. So please make sure you do not throw away or delay your vote. And with that, I turn it back in to my co-host, Kahari Mosley.
Thank you for that update. And again, I want to thank State Representative Jake Wheatley for joining us this evening. And again, just wanted to plug the short segment we did this afternoon with David Thornburg from the Committee of 70 about redistricting and gerrymandering. And with that, that will be tonight's legislative visit, a special visit with State Representative Jake Wheatley. Want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Look forward to having you join us again next Monday at 7 p.m. for another edition of the One Hood Power Hour. And thank you so much for joining us, and stay engaged, stay involved in the process, and see you next Monday at 7. Take care. Have a good night.